My name is Jax Finkel. I'm the Executive Director of Texas NORML. We're based out of Austin, Texas, the capital city. The first law regarding the possession of cannabis and making it a criminal offense actually originated in El Paso in 1913. So that's kind of where prohibition started, was in El Paso. It slowly spread not only across Texas, but across the country. And then we found ourselves in the 70s where there were actually people in jail serving life in Texas for possession of small amounts of cannabis. Keith Stroup came down and was doing visiting different incarceration areas, visiting people who were incarcerated, and he met up with our founder, Bill Norton and Stephen, and they founded Texas NORML, and the following legislative session, they were able to get us to the penalties we have now. So no more life. That was not an option for possession of a flower. Instead, it was 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine, which is still arguably not ideal, but in 1973, that was great. However, we know that during the 80s, cannabis movement kind of slowed down, and it started to pick back up in the 90s. There was a bill in San Marcos, and it would have addressed medical cannabis for patients at the local level because we still had the ability to change the laws that way at that time. However, the bill was getting traction, and then there was some civil disobedience that was up at the city hall, and people didn't react well to that. And then it made the legislature look at San Marcos and say, hey, we don't want the localities being able to change the laws that way. And so in 1997, they actually made it where drug laws have to be changed at the state level instead of the local level, which brings us to today where we have to change our laws that way. And during this process, we've seen bills introduced from the early aughts. And the first bill we really saw passed that made any change was in 2007, and that was cite and summons. And it essentially took the same penalty and just changed how they process you. You still face 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine for simple possession, but you don't get arrested that night, which means you don't get taken to jail that night, possibly not missing work the next day. But it doesn't change the penalty. It just keeps you from having a night in jail, which is great, but it is not decriminalization. And additionally, the cite and summons law is an opt-in program, so we have less than a dozen counties that are participating in it, and you have to live in the county that you're arrested in for it to even apply for you. So like most bills, there are a lot of caveats attached to participating. And then moving on, we saw the Texas Compassionate Use Program pass last session, and that gives high CBD oil cannabis to patients with intractable epilepsy. So it was very limited and left a lot of patients behind, but it did create a medical cannabis program here in Texas. And so that is start to finish the story of how Texas criminalized and then now is working to legalize cannabis.